Trade Federation Cosatu has called on government to lift the temporary prohibition on the sale of alcohol in South Africa and instead move towards more permanent changes. The federation says that it supported the temporary banning of the sale of alcohol under lockdown level 3 to enable government, health institutions and law enforcement structures to focus on dealing with the rising rate of COVID-19 infections. Here to unpack this further, I'm joined by Cosatu spokesperson Sizwe Pamla. Sizwe, good evening and thank you very much for your time. What has changed that now you would want the ban lifted?
Well, what we are trying to encourage here is dialogue between both government and the liquor industry. And of course, we have also met both the parties to try and listen to their sides of the story. Look, we agree with government. There are valid reasons to really shut down alcohol. We have been engaging with our own members in the health sector. They've been telling horrific stories about how alcohol abuse is really a problem as they are fighting this deadly pandemic. But at the same time, we have members in the liquor industry. We do have something called an alcohol economy in this country. And when we listen to those workers again, they're telling us stories, depressing stories of how they are failing to put food on the table, their livelihoods are at stake, and the employers themselves are threatening, in some instances, actually retrenching them. So we have to save lives and livelihoods. So at the end of the day, even the health system itself, we were telling our own members in the public service that for you to get paid, you need all of the taxes that are being contributed, including the sin tax. So there are workers whose livelihoods is really being decimated by this ban. So we think that if we work together collectively, we can come up with a compromise position.
Is the alcohol ban in itself potentially illegal? What's the view of Cosatu?
Well, we haven't really applied ourselves on the legalities. In fact, we did discourage the liquor industry when they were going to court because we said there are no easy solutions here. You are not going to, whatever the court decides, it is not going to fix the fact that alcohol is a problem in this country and it does cause a lot of problems for our health system. At the end of the day, what we are looking for are solutions. So as for the legalities, it's something that we haven't really looked at because we do sympathize with those working in the health sector. We know the weaknesses of our health system, and we know the problems of alcohol abuse in this country. It's something that we need to continue to have conversation about going forward. But at this present moment, we feel that for us to really at least get to a point where we reopen or we lift the ban, we need to start a conversation. And when we're having that conversation, all of us should approach it understanding that we are going to compromise or we are going to have to be forced to compromise.
So you're calling on government to show leadership, but you're also calling on the sector to show patriotism. Now, a ban on alcohol really prevents drunken fights. It prevents reduced violence in the domestics context. Also, drunk driving. It eliminates weekend binges, which are prevalent across South Africa. And we saw when that was lifted for a few months what actually happened. So how does the sector play its role here of being responsible citizens?
Firstly, it's irritating to hear them pontificating about how they are going to disinvest and how much they are pulling out of this economy. This is an economy that has given a lot to this sector, so they should not forget that. It can't be that a ban that is hardly a month old is already forcing them to retrench workers and threaten to disinvest from South Africa. It's something that we're not going to tolerate or even entertain as labor, because we know how much money they make out of this economy. So that's why we're saying, firstly, they have to be patriotic. They have to understand that they are not being targeted here. They understand exactly the problems that we're all talking about, because we have been talking to them when we were talking about putting together a social compact that looks at the liquor industry, because there are problems that needs to be addressed. The issue of binge drinking and alcohol abuse in South Africa is real. And we're dealing with the socio-economic consequences of that. You can look at the high mortality rate on the roads. You can look at the gender-based violence and other problems that have been identified. So we need to have those conversations. So it is irritating to hear them pretending as if they are not aware of these problems and all of a sudden talking about pulling money out of the economy. We should not allow ourselves to be blackmailed in that manner. But we also have been saying to them, look, you spend a lot of money on advertising, and maybe that money should be spent on advertising the dangers of coronavirus, teaching people about the vaccines, contributing to the health system, so that as and when government is really trying to push back against this deadly pandemic, you give them the necessary support. You have the expertise, you have the infrastructure, you utilize that infrastructure in a manner that eases the burden on government, because government is doing everything. We're all talking about skepticism amongst South Africans about the vaccines. We need to have an awareness campaigns. We need to have an education campaign on that. Let the alcohol industry or the liquor industry come on board. They should present some resources and make some proposals so that they become partners in all of this. So that if we then have a partnership, it will be easy for all of us to come out with solutions, because solutions are not going to be perfect. And solutions are not going to be imposed. They are not going to be imposed by government. They are not going to be imposed by the industry through courts. We all have to compromise. We all have to collectively sit around the table and find those solutions.
Yeah, that these are difficult things to maneuver, and there are no easy answers, as you put it. But what would be the solution? I mean, if we end the prohibition of alcohol sales, well, not we, but I mean, if government ends the prohibition of alcohol sales, we're going to see, and this is what the doctors are telling us, about 5,000 alcohol admissions in trauma units coming back into the system. What is the easy way around that?
Well, we already have a social compact that we were working on during the first wave of infections. Unfortunately, as soon as we all go to level 1, social partners, when there are different ways, they failed to pursue this. Now we are all talking about a third wave somewhere around March, so we need to ensure that we have this in place. Look, some of the restrictions that were previously imposed of reducing the days of the week when alcohol is being sold, we need to explore that. We need to reduce and impose curfews, and we need to ensure that the people who are in the industry themselves, they take full responsibility, because they are the ones who look the other way when they see some of their own colleagues violated the restrictions and the protocols that have been put in place. So that is why we're saying that we need to work with local authorities. We understand and sympathize with the law enforcement agencies when they say, we just don't have the resources to monitor alcohol abuse. I mean, we know that previously people were not allowed to drink outside of their yards, but now people are allowed to do that, because law enforcement agencies have been saying that we just don't have the resources to really enforce some of those laws. But what we're also saying is that while we are complaining that we don't have the resources, we are encouraging criminals and criminal syndicates to enter into this domain. Now they are starting to manufacture alcohol. They are the ones who are taking over this industry. And police themselves are being corrupted. I mean, we've seen videos circulating of police vans in some provinces delivering alcohol. This is something that we should take seriously, because everywhere where prohibition has been imposed, we have seen that there are blowback effects. So we need to tackle those blowback effects that we're starting to see. But the industry really has to come on board, because government is not going to be fighting a deadly virus at the same time spending millions of resources trying to police them. If they themselves do not take seriously the issue of self-policing, of really being responsible partners and constructive partners in all of this, then government will be left with no choice. There is a deadly pandemic that is killing people. Government has got no business spending resources monitoring people who themselves are not doing enough to really play their role.
So you've been proposing also some legal changes as one of the avenues to pursue. For example, a look at the minimum drinking age and a review on that. You've been talking about possibly the introduction of a 100-meter radius limitation of trade around educational and religious institutions. Are all these things that Cosatu would support a conversation on?
Definitely, yes. These are some of the things that are included in that social compact that I'm talking about, that is currently still at network. But also, we are encouraging the Department of Trade and Industry to really submit the Liquor Amendment Bill that they've been trying to strengthen, because right now, that Liquor Amendment Bill is going to be very helpful. We need to ensure that that Liquor Amendment Bill makes its way to Parliament, because it talks to all of those things, including increasing the limit of the drinking age. All of those things we need to ensure that we work collectively to find solutions. The problem here is that South Africa sadly does have something called an alcohol economy. Whether we are happy or not about that is the reality. These are the facts, and we need to acknowledge that. There's close to 800,000 workers whose livelihoods are being decimated by this alcohol ban. So we need to ensure that we do everything possible to collectively work together to compromise and find a common solution.
Cosatu spokesperson Sizwe Pamla, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on News at Prime here on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405.